will not be out by the time Shang-Chi is out is Oblivion song, which is a Robert Kirkman written book that we just heard about in the news recently. This is, of course, from Image and Skybound Entertainment, Kirkman's publisher over at Image. And the artist is Lorenzo De Felici. Colors were done by Annalisa Leone, and the letterer is Russ Wooten. This was a 36-issue run that ended earlier in this year, started in 2018. And I had to rush this to the top of our TLDR priority list. This was not a book that was really on my radar. You were talking about, like, before we were getting ready for the show, like how you had, what was it? You remember listing it off in our show notes under what's new, but not something that we were reading. It's a Kirkman book. So, it's something you automatically should want to give it a shot. Of course, Invincible, Walking Dead, among other things. I think we got to start looking for some more Kirkman stuff to talk about on this show. But the reason that I moved this up was not just because of Kirkman, but we saw Jake Gyllenhaal is going to star in the film adaptation of this. And I'll tell you what, Joe, this guy is the perfect fit to play the role of the main character, Nathan Cole. I was blown away, and I was blown away when I was reading this like the first few pages, and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, like Jake Gyllenhaal makes perfect sense for something like this. Absolutely. So I like Jake Gyllenhaal a lot too. I think he's one of the more dynamic actors of our generation. Synopsis: a decade ago, 300,000 citizens of Philadelphia were suddenly lost in oblivion. The government made every attempt to recover them, but after many years, they gave up. Nathan Cole won't. He makes daily trips, risking his life to try and rescue those still living in the apocalyptic hellscape of Oblivion. But maybe Nathan is looking for something else. Why can't he resist the siren call of the Oblivion song? This, Joe, has potential. I know you always want to ask, we always have a question like, is this movie, TV, better fit? Of course, this is going to get turned into a movie. This should be turned into multiple movies. I think 3, based on the way Volume 2 ends, and based on the way Volume 4 ends, it would make sense for 3. Honestly, if you want to know what's going to go on or have an idea of what's going to happen in this movie when it does come out, I don't know if that's supposed to be next year or the year after, read the first 2 arcs. That's all you need to read, and you should have an idea. I'd be stunned if they try to cram it all into one movie. I'd actually be kind of pissed, because there's a lot to flesh out. It'd be one thing if you turned it into 2 movies. I could kind of see that, but I think 3, there's potential to do that, especially when you're dealing with a guy like Gyllenhaal, who's obviously an outstanding actor, and I think he's going to produce this. Now, De Felici, I'm not as familiar with De Felici's art style. I can't recall what else he's done. It's not my favorite. That's for sure. But as I first open up, I'm like, oh boy, okay. I mean, I see the cover. The first cover, the cover on the first trade, I don't know if this is the first cover, but I saw this and I'm like, oh man, this looks friggin' awesome. But the way he draws like a person's face, to me, it's just kind of like, there's definitely a wide range in this book, and it's just like, it's not for me. It's kind of like grim and a little gross in a way. But you know what? With the world we're dealing with right now, with Oblivion and the stresses that are going on with that, it makes perfect sense, because you're basically right now, Joe, dealing with Earth, and you're dealing with this like other universe kind of deal with Oblivion, and characters are going back and forth through there, and it's just in Philadelphia too. So the people there, I think, are also uglier. I can't confirm or deny that necessarily. I've only been there once, but I've heard things. But in like specifically with Nathan, he is worn the fuck down too. So it makes sense for him to like have this face that's just like ugh, all the time. And then the creatures too that are brought up and all this too, because Oblivion's another world. There are going to be other creatures there. It makes perfect sense for like De Felici's art style makes perfect sense for this. And as much as like sometimes I say not my favorite art style, there are times where it still fits perfectly with the story. Die was an example of that, where now like I love that art for that story. And then for this makes perfect sense as well too. And all around, Joe, very, very easy, fast read. There are definitely times where there's a lot of dialogue, but still it still moves quickly. It's a good tempo to it. I never felt like I had a lull. And I mentioned Nathan Cole. He is the main character in all this. There's Heather, who is a military official. She is dating Nathan and has a lot of say in all this. She's dealing with this Oblivion stuff quite a bit, naturally through him, but also just because of the U.S. government. Speaking of which, you have Director Ward, who's this military official who it seems like if they had a department of like dealing with Oblivion related issues, he would be the guy who's in charge of that. And then we have Bridget and Duncan, who are like close friends of Nathan Cole, who are helping him with what he's doing, at least at the start of things. Their roles kind of evolve in time. They are married, and and Duncan was actually one of those people who was caught in Oblivion. And what happened, Joe, is basically there's this event where a bunch of people get lost to Oblivion, and Nathan is trying to bring people back. Also, in Philadelphia, stuff that was in Oblivion came to Earth, and then it creates this cataclysmic event. And that's partially where a lot of people, like some of the people, like it was 300,000. A lot more of those people died on Earth because of the shit that came over from Oblivion. And then there's people who were lost to Oblivion that are like living there.
So big question: where's the better place to live, Oblivion or Philly?
That's a great question. I'll tell you what. There is a character who will tell you that it's better to be in Oblivion.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's fucking Philly.
Part of the reason it's an easy read is because Kirkman knows how to like twist, make a little twist there. It's like, oh shit, what? And then you got to read a little bit more, and then you got to read a little bit more. But the way he ends each arc too is like, you were already doing a really good job. I was already hooked in for the next one, but then it's like the end of the first arc, I legitimately out loud was like, oh shit, like, really? Wow. Okay, and then it kind of makes things make a lot more sense too. But I absolutely loved it. There's no lull in this whatsoever. So I like this is a great find.
So how does this stack up or compare style wise with some of Kirkman's other stuff, like Invincible, like Walking Dead?
The aftermath of it is very depressing, and I know it's been 10 years, but like for Nathan, it's like it happened yesterday in a lot of ways, just because he won't let certain things go. And you find out like there's this layer to it, and then there's that layer to it, and then there's another layer to it, and it's like, okay, like now I can't play this. Like I can't let it go. It's got a different vibe, but at the same time, it's like, you know, Invincible. And we'll tell you like that's an outstanding series. Very, very different, but very much a must read. The Walking Dead is like all-time legendary. So like, I don't want to put it necessarily on that level. And saying like Invincible, I think is going to be like similar because it's just like the animated series did so well and obviously had a long run. I think people are going to go back and read that a lot. If those two are in a separate tier of their own, Oblivion Song feels like it belongs like just below that.
Yeah, Kirkman is a great storyteller. You know, his concepts are great. I mean, you couldn't talk about three very different stories here, right? It's not like he's just, he can always kind of writes a similar story. No, like these are three very distinct stories.
And one thing that's kind of like, there's like a line between all three of these is like, it very much feels like this could happen in real life. Like I know you're dealing with superheroes in Invincible, but at the same time, he tries to give us a vibe like, yeah, this is like what real life would be like if we had superheroes. And I know The Boys does that, but it's in a different vein. But like that's there in Oblivion Song. I know they won't take it like shot for shot, but they could do that. And Jake Gyllenhaal will give it a slightly he'll give it his own twist on it, but I think he will be able to channel this character very well. It's just like I'm telling you, I'm reading it and I'm like, yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal is perfect. Like whoever decided this was like the great job with the casting.
You know, you're talking about destroying Philly. I'm in.
You could also just do it where you want to do the first two arcs and not say it's going to be a trilogy and just wait and see, and you'd still be fine. Like Kirkman did a really good job where this is like written in a way where it could add like for the big screen, it makes perfect sense.